All right, now I'm going to introduce our next speaker, and we're going to begin our afternoon session focusing more on new homes. And so our keynote for the afternoon is Nick Jacobs, president and founder of Diverge Homes and affiliated companies. He founded the company in 2016, and he oversees all the operations, services, and developments. Specific responsibilities include site acquisition, building and site design, data science, and financing of all projects. Jeremiah, are you back there? Yeah. I don't see his presentation on the screen here, which would be nice. Don't know how to do that. Anyway, Diverge Homes' founding vision remains in place today to redevelop underutilized parcels of land in and around American small towns, starting with Colorado. Nick structured the company so that architecture, amenities, and construction operations can be repeated with high consistency regardless of location. And he has an MA from Utah State and a BS from Michigan State. And fun fact, Nick loves to see and hear live music, sometimes travels to places specifically for the music. Do you like the Grateful Dead?
I do not like music.
Okay. All right. Okay, this is working, so just look at those, and you don't look at this, because that's not, so you just advance the slides here, and if you need to go back, it's that one. If you want to use it like a laser
Big
pointer,
one's
it's
the
that one.
advanced.
Yeah.
Sure.
And the microphone is here, so just project a little bit.
Thank you. And thank you, Neil. Thanks, everyone, for having me. I am so happy to be here. I did not think that this organization was going to be as productive for a person like me as it has been. I got asked to be here simply because after the Marshall Fire, my company made a huge switch. And as of today, we are now an all-electric home builder in the United States. I don't know how many home builders can say that, but we have about 100 units in the pipeline of our company. I'll talk a little bit about that, but today we are 100% moving forward with all electric across all of it. And it's because what I'm going to talk to you about is the business case that justifies why we made this change. And quite frankly, the purpose of today's meeting is really to talk to you about who we are, what was the catalyst for us going to all electric, and then really get into the numbers with all of you, because I love that part of it. So the first thing about the company is the fact that in 1998, I had this idea to run a company like this and to start it up. It took me until 2016, so it took me, 18 years to start this company before I actually did it. I did a lot between now and then, of course, like we all would have. But don't give up if you're thinking of this. I am an idealism failure kind of person. And I've had 3 successful companies prior to this, in the software industry, in the telecommunications industry, and now here. And I will say this, I don't know how many people here have climbed a power tower? Any hands in the air? No power tower climbers? Or cell phone tower climbers? So in the 90s, I got after I dropped out of being a history professor candidate and then working in telecom, I got a job with my brother-in-law to go work in telecom, and that's really how I got involved in construction and how I got involved in doing that. I'd done some construction prior to that, but I really fell in love with this idea, and this idea of doing what I would call infill. And so what is small town infill? To us, this is all the stuff we all know, right? Preaching to the choir, the walkability, the new architecture in an old neighborhood. And these are what the things the buyer looks at. But what we look at as a business person is, why are we doing it, right? And so to me, as a guy who, in the late 80s, I was building shanties and running rainforest action groups at Michigan State University, And one of the funniest things I ever had was a shanty that was built next to mine that said cash on it. It was the Conservative American Shanty Haters. And you got to appreciate that kind of humor. I think it's pretty funny. And, so in the 80s, this is like, I'm an idealist type guy, right? And so to me, building in Detroit, which is where I came from, and seeing that type of a landscape, I knew that we could revitalize. I knew there was ways to revitalize. but I didn't want to do it in big cities, right? The gentleman who is from Morgan, I think it was Morgan Creek Ventures, who was here earlier, what they do is exactly the thing that I didn't want to do, right? I don't want equity investors and hedge funds and private equity people that I wouldn't really have a lot in common with telling me how to run and operate and do a business. And so that was probably one of the reasons why I'm on my 5th company, right? I was always doing it my own way. But the key thing about that was after I failed at my .com in Detroit doing distance learning, and I got the job in telecom, I was traveling all over the United States. And I kept seeing these small towns. I traveled for 16 years. I moved my family probably 8 times. I lived in Manhattan, DC, Florida, Jersey, San Francisco, Utah, Chicago. Yeah, so I've been around. And I kept seeing all these small towns when I was there. And the idea kept hitting me, there's a place for this. That the future is not more sprawl, and the future is not big urban density. The future is going into these beautiful pre-war main streets throughout the United States and trying to build there because that's where the infrastructure is. That's where we want to live because it's small, it's quaint. You park your car on a Friday, you don't have to get into it until Monday because you've got shops and restaurants, right? That was the stuff I was attracted to 20 years ago. And so the vision came, we finally put in, and what I realized when I founded this company was that the infrastructure is already there. It was a huge win for me. And if you were like me and you wrote books on how to entitle cell phone towers, which if you can imagine how difficult that could have been in the 90s when no one wanted to see a tower, right? Back in those days, trying to explain to people what we're doing, we had a lot of convincing to do. And it was so easy for me to actually convince people about this business model. And I have one angel investor, it's my wife, and that's it, right? There's nobody else, it's just us. So I basically pushed all my chips in 2014, 2015 to do this. And I love it because it gives me the freedom to do this kind of weird stuff, which is basically go into what we're gonna talk about today. Buyer demographics, and let me go back for a second. So one of the things about my business that makes us unique in a home builder too is when you're selling homes in this kind of an area, it's so much more highly attractive. We're in a massive problematic environment with high interest rates. We really are, and I'm not debating that. And I'm still gonna take the heat for that. My company's gonna get hit hard, just like every other home builder is gonna get hit hard. But what's great about what we do and where we've chosen our locations is that it's extremely difficult to entitle in small town. And how many people here know what NIMBY stands for? Not in my backyard. How many people know what NOPE stands for? This is what we used to use in telecom. It's called nothing on planet Earth. There are people who don't care what your rationale is. They don't care how good of an argument you have. They don't want you building near them, around them, anything to do with it. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, right? There's a lot of NOPEs. There's a lot of NIMBYs when you're building in small towns. But once you're entitled, once you go through those neighborhood meetings and you have all these public discourse and all this public discussion, what I found is that our business is really well insulated from recessionary pressure. And I'm not saying we're immune, by no means, but we're insulated from it. So today we have about 6 active developments. One is almost done. It's the 42-unit development we have in Lafayette. It's called Cannon Trail. It's on the east side of Old Town. I've got a 23-unit development that's underway in Erie, downtown Erie. Got another 30 units in downtown Erie that's in entitlement as well. Looking at 2 projects in Golden, and I just spent 5.5 hours crossing the Continental Divide twice this morning from Steamboat because that's where our other project is. And I was up there for the last 3 days trying to get some work done there. This is the catalyst. This is what changed everything for me. I'm a pretty, hyper person. I've got a lot of data. I'll go toe-to-toe with anybody on all sorts of science stuff, right? Prior to the fire, everyone said, well, Nick, you do all this stuff. Why don't you do all electric homes? Is it not too loud?
I can't hear you on the phone.
Oh, good. Sure. 1 second. So people kept asking me, why don't you go and do all electric homes? And they started asking me these questions as early as 2016.
We'll switch on the top there. Okay.
Is that better? So they started asking me about in 2016, why aren't you doing all electric? And up until December 30th of last year, I'd say, too complicated, don't want to get into it. I'm going to look at that in like 2023, 2024. We'll kind of kick the tires on that, right? I live in Louisville. I've been there for about 10 years. And on that day and what happened afterward, that was what we did, right? I think of my company's mission and my whole mission in life is kind of like before the Marshall Fire and after the Marshall Fire. It was an absolute pivotal moment for us, and it's a good thing that came out of it for us. There's so many people who lost so much, so many of our friends, so many of our neighbors and family that live there. Nevertheless, you got to pull good things out of bad things, and that's what came out of it for us. And the key thing was the incentives that were released by Excel, thank you, in the state of Colorado. Those max out at what's, if you're not going to do a passive home, and I don't really want to talk about what that is. I think most of you know what a passive home is. But all the other houses, you can get a benefit of about $27,500 from if you're a Marshall Fire affected homeowner. And that incentive is exactly what drove someone like me to go, wow, what does it really mean to do an all-electric home? I actually thought, and I'm not kidding, you still had to do baseboard heating with heat pumps. I had no idea that you could do air flow, that you could have all of that. That's how naive I was on December 31st. I'm not there today. We're very different today. So I'd say from January 1st to approximately March, April, is when we were just doing triage as a business, trying to help our neighbors, trying to figure this whole mess out, trying to figure out whether or not we were going to participate and try to help people. I'm not a home builder for clients, right? I'm a home builder that says, come buy our product. It's this gorgeous product in this really cool small town. And we're really focused on architecture and ergonomics inside the house for you. That's my focus. Now we've shifted and we take all that, but now we're saying, sure, we'll help you. We'll help you. We know you're underinsured. We know you're this. We know you're dealing with that. And these people have PTSD that is off the charts. They lost everything they have. And so what it really dug in for me by, I'd say about April, May, was we got to figure out this all-electric thing. And so we started this 5-month analysis process, and I'm still in it. We're still deeply in the analysis process, but I took a lot of the same practices I did from the telecom industry, from the software industry that I was in, from all the other stuff I've done throughout my background, which is really a systems analysis and operations approach to things. And all I can say is I built so many spreadsheets over the last 5 months, I felt like I was a kid again in the telecom industry doing spreadsheets on this and that, right? Just spreadsheet after spreadsheet after spreadsheet to analyze what type of heat pump, what type of service, what type of hot water heat pump, what type of service, and over again, all different fluids, what type of thermal envelope and why. And what I found out was we could really get lost. There's so much misinformation out there, and I know that you know that. But if you're if you're talking to people, I mean, there's just so much misinformation about what an all-electric home means, what it requires to get there. I don't know how to solve that problem. I think that it's just something I wanted to acknowledge, that we have to try to reduce the amount of misinformation about this. And then what we ended up with after this 5-month analysis, and we really came to this, gosh, I would say, what is it, today is October 27th, probably right before Labor Day, we realized we just have to stop looking at all the different DOE Energy Smart models and just pick 2. And so the 2 we picked are these. It's Energy Star Home version 3.2, and it's the Energy Star Next Gen All Electric. Obviously, the Next Gen All Electric is not zero energy ready, it is zero energy. The first one is a zero energy ready home. How many people are familiar with what version 3.2 is, or what an Energy Star home is? So the Energy Star homes are these certifications for how you have to build your house. There's standards that are called prescriptive, and those are sort of like thou shalt not do, or thou must do these things, right? Those are sort of, you must do them. And then there's guidelines. The version 3.2 gives you a mix of both. and it says you've got some flexibility. You can do a gas range, you can do a gas furnace, but the house still has to be wired with 220 to the oven. It's still got to be wired so that later on you can make it an all-electric home. That's what a ZERH certification means. And so we're looking at that in the Marshall Fire area. The Energy Star Next Gen All-Electric is the one I'm most excited about. And today, like I mentioned, we are moving forward to be a 100% home builder. And so when we analyzed all these different pieces between these two different types of houses, Energy Star version 3.2 versus an Energy Star Next Gen, what we found was that we were building insulation even before the fire that was pretty much on par. We were doing R23 walls. We were doing R19 minimum to R21 basements. We were doing R50 to R60 ceilings. That's as high as you can get today for most certifications, and it meets it. I didn't know that we were already doing that, but that it met that high level, but that's what we were doing anyways, because that's what my architect and my team was pushing us to do. So a lot of what you see here between these two different build types, it's all the same. The envelope is roughly the same between the two. So there's no cost benefit to doing one or the other. If you look at this in the HERS report, you've got the the HERS report is this energy analysis that you pay a consultant to do. Some of the folks who are talking from Helio or Good Elephant could talk to you all, or Energy Elephant would be able to explain it to you as well. But basically, it's an analysis that says how energy efficient your house is going to be. It's really similar, except you're doing one for gas, one for electric. But the costs are the same from the consultant who's going to do it. And so where are the key differences? And so for us, the key differences were, if you're going to do an Energy Star home, you can still do a gas furnace. You can still do a standard air conditioning system. Your ductwork, totally the same. To make it energy ready, you must have an ERV or HRV. It'll stand for that recovery system, right? The air recovery within a house. You could do a gas water heater in a version 3.2. Oh, 5 minutes? That's it? Okay. So what we found was that there's a lot of differences here in just appliances, in your mechanicals, and in PV that you need to have on the property. And that's kind of what this summarizes. So the business case is this. I put together the numbers. There are some folks in this room who contributed to that. Chris Butts, where are you? I don't think I've ever. So he's a subcontractor that's deeply involved in heat pump systems throughout the Front Range and other parts of Colorado. He was a submitted candidate for while we're trying to analyze all of this price. And we're looking at it. So this is my breakdown of numbers across these areas, right? You look at HVAC, it's about $16,500 to do a heat pump system within your house compared to a gas system. I can't seem to escape it. I've gone to 4 different subcontractors. They're consistent. When I compare those systems, it's about $16,500. And the system goes down. You need a ventilation, so that's about $4,000, maybe $3,500 in that range. You need some of this other stuff I've listed here, right? EV car charging, it's required for new constructions to meet this standard. Service panels, you got to upgrade the service panel to handle 320 amps in a house. The days of 200 amps are gone. If you're going to do an all-electric home, you're going to have to do a 320 amp system as well. The service amperage, you need to bring in, so to bring 300 amps to a home, you're going to have, if you're an existing home, you have to trench and bring new power lines from the transformer to that house, right? There's a new construction, it's just a new wire, it's the same cost. But the service amperage is a higher fixed fee from Excel. So then you get down into the other things like the solar, the building envelope, and what I calculated out, and we've done this model on a lot of different scenarios, I'd give it a margin of error of about 5%. It's about $62,000 for me to construct a home that's all electric, including solar and battery backup with that solar. And I wouldn't even call it battery backup. I just call it battery as another power source, another fuel is battery fuel. Just like the solar is a form of fuel. So it's about $11,500 to do it one way, it's $62,000 the other. But when you take into account all the incentives, it's about break-even capital cost net zero cost for version 3.2, and it's about $25,000 for an all-electric home. These houses are costing us about $700,000 to build, right? What are we talking about? It's 4%, 5% of total cost, and I guarantee within any jurisdiction in the United States, that 4 to 5% cost scale will scale. If I built this same product in Detroit, it would probably cost me $400,000 to build it, not $700,000. And it's just the way the labor costs and things work out here. But it would probably be, again, 4 or 5% to go all electric. So that's a good business model. And this was the aha moment for me. When I did all this, I was like, holy cow, this fits my brand. It fits all my unique small town infill stuff. But I'm telling you, it will fit everybody. Every home builder needs to do this analysis. The only reason I did it is because I live in Louisville and the Marshall Fire was the catalyst to have me do it. And I'm a huge evangelist of it today. And I want to talk to everybody and anybody who wants to see these numbers. We're going to publish these on our website. We're going to publish all of this. This is important for people to see so they understand it can be done. And then last thing I would say is please get those same Marshall Fire incentives across every home builder in the United States. Do we want all electric adoption in 10 years or do we want it in 50 years for new home builders? If we do this incentive program that's in the Marshall Fire, that $24,000 gets faster, easier, lower. And I'm telling you, if we can do that type of incentive, almost every home builder that's doing new construction in the United States would at least consider it. And I'm guessing a lot would end up doing it. So that's it. We talked a little bit about this already. I think I'm risking $50,000 in construction costs in this market to build an all-electric home with solar and low to zero operating costs. That's my risk. I'm willing to take it. It's probably not even that high. It's probably going to be about $40,000 of extra cost. But I will say this, that's about 5%, 4% of my construction cost. I think I could sell that product for 8 to 15% more than my competitor who's not doing it. Does that make sense? You know, I mean, that's where the business, that's what's fun about doing business is we can do a lot of weird stuff like this and take these risks. And if we fail, what are we failing at? I mean, a slower sales cycle, a slower absorption rate? That's it. Thank you. Do we have time for Q&A?
Yeah, you have 6 or 7 minutes
Sure.
for questions.
Yeah, I'll answer any questions you want. If you want me to go back to that numbers screen, we can. Yeah. Any questions from anyone? Sure, go ahead.
So are you considering smart panels so you don't have to put in 320 amps?
We have looked at the smart panels, and my electrician, when it comes to that, at this time, they don't feel confident enough in the ability for that to do it. Because at the end of the day, they're still afraid. And this is the same thing that my HVAC contractor, my primary HVAC contractor, so Chris, who owns Perfect Temp, has been doing heat pumps for years. My HVAC contractor really had to, that I've been using for dozens of units prior to this, that was my primary, he was in the same boat. So we're not there yet. There's so much we can do differently. I learned a lot of things today, just in this presentation, that I want to start looking at too. So, yeah. Hi.
I have 2 questions. In the Energy Star Next Gen all electric,
Yes.
is solar required there, or
It is not.
solar an extra?
It would be an extra. However, if you're going to build an all-electric home, I think that the economic impact of operating costs, I cannot give them enough confidence that their electric costs aren't going to skyrocket. People,
Gotcha.
you know what I mean? So it's like, I've had so many discussions with so many people from the Marshall Fire about, well, I don't want to go all electric because my operating costs are going to be so enormous. And it's like, no, they're not. No, they're not. And in fact, let's not debate that. We're going to do solar with your project if you agree to work with us, right? And I just have to figure out how to balance and better show that operating cost. And until people really see the actuals a lot of our theoretical models, they don't buy it, And granted, this is a different demographic of people, right? They're struggling on many different levels, right? They're not the average new home buyer by any stretch.
That makes sense, thanks. The other question, do your numbers include any new incentives from the Inflation Reduction Act?
They do not. So 0 of IRA. Yeah.
Would you be eligible for any of those?
I hope, yeah. So it doesn't include any of the builder credits. I think we could get another $4,000 in builder credits, but that's not enough, right? The real money are these incentives you see back here. The 27.5 that Excel has stepped up to do $17,500 for these all-electric homes, which, by the way, that water heater issue that was brought up from the gentleman from Helio is no joke. We really need help with that. We're having to do an 80-gallon high-efficiency heater just to meet the standard for most of our houses, because the standard is based on the number of bedrooms. If you're at 4 bedrooms or more, sure. Gentleman in the blue or the collared shirt?
Two quick questions. Have you changed the architecture of the homes to accommodate the systems you're bolting on?
We need to change our roofs, yes. So
Okay.
before this, I loved roof articulation. I loved what's called fenestration, which is windows and doors looking different. We're huge fans of large windows to begin with, but I loved sidewall articulation, and we need to create a more efficient, boxy building. And I know that doesn't sit well from a design perspective, and my architect is still pushing back, but the days of me having 12 different roof pitches and cricket walls, that has to end.
What about, are the appraisers keeping up when they look at your houses versus other houses?
I haven't got there yet.
You haven't gotten there?
No, we haven't even built an electric home yet.
Okay.
Nope, we haven't built one. We're in design phase for about a dozen. And we'll be submitting those to Louisville and Superior shortly. Sure. Gentleman in the blue.
Yeah, would you just go back one slide? I think you had some other. Yeah, I was looking at the solar cost, 29,000. Is that, what size that unit is? That sounds pretty high.
It's about 25 panels.
Okay, huh.
It's a 25 panel system with batteries.
Maybe the costs have gone up.
But that's before credits. That's before credits.
Yeah, right. But yeah, I put in 22 panels for about 15,000 4 or 5 years ago. That's why I was curious. Okay.
The kilowatt size for that, I honestly don't know. I would have to tell you. All I know is that what we're trying to do is maximize design. I kind of created a baseline cost standard of about 25 panel system with battery backup and just baselined it from there. Any other questions? Gentleman in the black?
Yeah, so we're in the process of building what I call a geriatric frat pad. My wife calls it our feet first house. It's our last house, right? So my demographic's very different than somebody that might be building a 4-bedroom house that legitimately will 4 bedrooms like we used to. Is there a demographic that you see as an easy target to adopt what you're trying to do? What's your sweet spot from a demographic standpoint?
For me, building on the Front Range, I'm determined not to build houses over $800,000 if I can do that, if I can price them out at $800,000 or less. But, I just sold a single-family home for $1.65 million. And it's like, the demographic I want for these types of projects are going to be paired homes in small-town districts with very simple roof configurations where we can maximize solar and figure out how to do vertical solar on the sidewalls as well. And then you would have an above-grade elevation that is less than 1,500 square feet, so we're talking a really small footprint. To me, that makes the most sense.
Sure. Did you look at factory-built houses as opposed to stick-built?
Yeah, I have. I did a lot in the beginning of the business.
Any
I still
opinions?
do. There's no, whether it's SIP, modified SIP, preformed walls, none of it compares to the speed and the cost of which I can literally manufacture a home on the property. And I thought without a doubt, because I worked my way up into being an executive in a telecom company, managing a publicly traded business, because I was obsessed with efficiency. And so we had these warehouses across America where we were rebuilding cell tower configurations. And then we would truck them out, built, tested, and done. And then we just crane them up and turned them on for all of my clients, whether that was AT&T or whomever, right? So I thought for sure we're going to build houses that way. And I've yet to see it, and I have dug in deep on this issue. Really deep. And I'm really disappointed that we can't figure this out yet. But manufacturing on site is still less costly, probably by about 10%. And I don't have the risk of missing foundation pieces, right? Because foundation has to be manufactured on site. I can't drop a basement into a house. Anything else? Gentleman in the blue?
We have an online question. How much savings have you seen in reduced framing and drywall to accommodate drop ducts?
How much savings in reduced to do drop ducts?
I think this has to do with changing maybe your HVAC practices.
Yeah. You know, the truth is that the HVAC practices don't change. In fact, because we're using a higher quality air handler, whether that's through Brown or Bosch or Mitsubishi or Carrier, and I'm a fan of Carrier, I'm a fan of anything I can source, find in the United States. I'll always choose that first. If costs are all equal and performance is equal, I'm always going to choose that. But my point is, today we're doing, on a standard gas house, it's a one-zone system, maybe a second furnace upstairs to handle a bigger house. Now, it's one system in the basement, in a larger mechanical room, but it's got 3 zones to it. It's got 3 zones to it, right? Basement, first, and third, or second, and they're all thermostat controlled separately. Because these new heat pump systems have such better infinite airflow, constantly variable airflow, that we can control temperature in such a better way. And it's about a $6,000 charge. That's what gets to that price point I was mentioning, that $16,500 at the top. Part of that is the air handler system, because it's so much more sophisticated. So there's really been no change in terms of framing. Framing's the same, because it's all ducted work. Any other questions? Thank you all.